going to go ahead and now share my screen. Choose desktop. And so, yeah, I think it'll be fine. I think building on the sandbox looks similar enough. This looks just like what you see, right?
Yes.
Okay. So in terms of building a new project, um, the first thing I'm going to do is create a new GitHub repository. So I'm going to go to my GitHub, go to the repositories tab, which is what this shortcut is. And GitHub always takes a long time for whatever reason to get going here. Okay, I'm going to create a new repository. Come on, wake up. And which we can call this Atom Sinatra. I'll just call it Sinatra practice. I think that'll work. I'm going to create this repository. Meanwhile, in the IDE, which is here, I'm going to do so. I'm going to install a gem called Corneal.
Okay.
Corneal is a gem. Do you have any familiarity with Corneal?
You know what? I saw it in the ones in the study group I did recently. He gave us like a link to the GitHub of it.
Cool.
So it sets up like the blanket setup.
Right. So unless you prefer to go file by file, which we absolutely can do, I'm going to suggest that we use Corneal. And I'll show you. We'll show you what it does. So I'm going to say Corneal. Once it's installed, I could say Corneal new, and it basically is a generator that generates the scaffold or the file structure with the basic file setup of a Sinatra application. So I'm going to call this Sinatra, that's spelled right? Practice project, for lack of a more creative. Actually, do you have any kind of domain you'd like to work with or think about working with?
I don't.
Okay, so, and what this is going to do is create us a new project named whatever I called it. In this case, Sinatra Practice Project. Notice that we have, can't I make this bigger? I thought I could. Maybe I can't. Okay. We have this new file here called Sinatra Practice Project. And I'm going to CD into it. CD Sinatra Practice Project. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in git init so that I'm going to connect the GitHub repository with this one. And then I'm going to do git remote -v, which is saying, hey Git, what's the remote that's connected to this repository? And there isn't one, which is great. So then I'm going to go back to my new repository, and what I want to do is push an existing repository from the command line. So I'm just going to copy these 2 lines of code. It's nice that they give them to us. They're given to us. Paste them right in, and okay, blah 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 blah. Git remote -v. Okay. Oh, the reason this error, by the way, it means that, what did I forget to do before I pushed? Do you know? I initialized the remote, but what did I fail to do?
Commit.
Exactly. Yep. So this line of code worked. Git remote add origin. So I'm adding a repository. I'm calling it the origin. I'm adding a remote, I should say, a remote repository. So git remote adds a new remote repository when there aren't any. And nothing was returned from git remote -v, which tells me that there was not a remote repository attached to this repo. I'm calling this new remote origin, and I'm giving it the SSH link for it. When I tried to push, this is saying there's nothing here to push. Okay. So now, like you said, I forgot to commit. So I'm going to do git add dot. This tells me commit, stage everything for committing, and then git commit with a commit message, which I'm just going to say initial commit use Corneal to scaffold project. So I'm going really quickly through this because this isn't the part that I think we need to focus on. So your job is to slow me down and say, hold on, stop, if any of this is really confusing.
That's okay. I mean, this is the stuff I did for the CLI project.
Right. So now I've just committed all that. Now I should be able to run that same line of code, git push -u origin master. This is saying push. And this, I need this part because it's the first time that I'm pushing. I'm pushing to origin and I'm pushing the master branch. For in the future, I'll just be able to do git add, git commit, and git push with nothing else on the end of push. I'll still need a commit message. Git add dot, git commit with a commit message, and git push. Because now I should be set up. So if I go back here and I refresh this page, or I just click on the name of the repository, all my code is here now, which is nice. And so let's look through this, and I think it's probably easier to look through. Sorry, I keep switching. I'm used to switching to a different place. In fact, you know what? To make life easier for me, I'm going to pull this and make it big. Cool. Awesome. That's easier. So let's look at what we got here. So we got an app folder. So can you tell me, actually, I'm going to turn this around. Maybe it'll be easier if I rm, if I cd up and just get rid of these. Rm, rf, my CLI again, rm, rf, whatever. So I'm just deleting those extra folders that happen to be in here. You know what? I'm going to remove the README too. Cool. So now all you can see is the folder where we actually are right here. Hopefully that's helpful. So now I'm going to cd back into it. Maybe. Cool. So tell me about this file structure. Can you know what's going on here? Is there anything you do know that you can tell me based on what you see here?
Sure. We have the app folder.
Okay. What's in there? What should be in there?
Application controller or controllers.
Good.
Models.
Yes.
Views.
Perfect. The app contains the MVC structure. That's exactly correct. Your controllers, your models, and your views. If we go through these, you already said application controller. Why do we have application controller? What's that?
That's to basically tell, direct the user where we want the user to go to get to post.
Okay, so you're describing the job of a controller, which is correct, and that's exactly right. Where would I look? I'm sorry, I just kind of interrupted you. I apologize for that.
Okay.
What else were you going to say about the controller?
I mean, that was pretty much it. Just, taking the user where the user needs to go. Get and post, right? And you're just deleting stuff.
Okay. So I'm going to make a comment. The controller, like you said, is the intermediary between models and views, right? It describes our routes in Sinatra and our actions, or what to do when a route is matched. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. In Sinatra, get is actually a method that's a Sinatra method, which takes an argument of a path or a URL and a block. And the block is where we tell it what to do. The method, which corresponds to a verb, to an HTTP verb, along with the route tells us, or along with the URL or the string, gives us the actual request, right? The route that's firing at any given moment, right? Yeah. So our application controller is our main controller. It inherits from Sinatra base, which gives us access to all these methods like get, like you mentioned, post, patch, delete, all those methods that we can actually build out what we want to happen with these routes. We could stick to just one controller, but more likely to organize our code, we're going to have a controller for every model. That's usually pretty typical anyway. Where do we actually tell Sinatra, hey, this is the controller you need to use? Do you know where that happens?
In the file?
Config.ru, yes. And here it says run application controller. As I build out more controllers, what method am I going to use rather than run? Do you know?
Use.
Use, yeah. So I'm going to use user's controller or dog's controller or whatever controllers I build. Good, 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 good. What do the models represent? I don't have any in here yet, but what are our models?
Um, those would be your .rb files, and that would be the classes.
Good. The model classes, yeah, exactly. The Ruby versions of what we're saving in the database. Now, of course, let's talk about that for a second. How does data persist in a Sinatra application, particularly in the Sinatra applications that we're building right now?
I don't think I follow the question.
So if suppose that you and I build out some functionality in this application, and we build out, say we build a users table, which actually I think we're going to do. I should say we build a users model, and we create some users. When I close my computer today and I open it again tomorrow, those users will still be there. Why? How? Do you know?
Why would the users?
How do we persist data from one day to another, from from when we power down our computer to when we open it the next day? Where is it saving?
In the database?
In the database. What language is the database that we're using?
Active Record.
Active Record is a gem. It's a Ruby gem. So the language of Active Record is Ruby. What?
So it's SQL, SQL.
Yeah. So Active Record. So tell me about Active Record. What's Active Record?
Active Record then is what is interpreting SQL, or it's helping SQL run more efficiently?
Well, Active Record is what's writing and executing all the SQL for us, right? Do you have once you're building a Sinatra application that's using Active Record, you don't have to write a single line of Sinatra, do you?
You mean in SQL? Or?
Sorry, you don't have to write a single line of SQL, do you?
No.
Right. Active Record does that. So where does that connection happen? Do you know? We're kind of taking a step aside from the app file here for a moment. Where do we actually set up a connection to the database?
In the environment.
Right here. So Active Record is a gem. It's actually part of Rails. It's part of it, but it's available as a gem for use on its own, and it's been adapted to use with Sinatra. So Active Record base is a class that has a class method called establish connection, and we're using SQLite 3 in this case so there are several versions of SQL that we could use: Postgres, MySQL, and SQLite 3 is the one that we happen to be using.
I'm listening. I'm just plugging in my computer real quick.
Cool. Can you hear me okay? Like you're
Yeah.
okay.
My what's it called? I just got the low battery note. That's all.
Oh, okay, cool. Do you want me to pause for a second?
No, we're good.
Okay. Okay, cool. I can't see you, so you got to tell me if I got to stop or anything. So the environment file is saying set us up right now for development. Require bundler setup says require all my gems, which is what bundler.require is doing as well, saying let's make sure we have everything we need. Everything in our gem file will be available to us. Then we establish our connection to a database. If there isn't one, then we'll create one upon a migration. In fact, if we look now, there is no database yet, but we're establishing a connection here, and this will come into play the first time we run rakedv migrate. Require all is an app that says not only do we need all of our gems loaded, but we need all the code that lives inside of this app folder. So every single file inside of here will now be loaded as well. So this part says load up all of my gems. Is that feedback coming from me or you?
Yeah, sorry. There's a gardener outside of the house doing some stuff.
Okay.
He just showed up next to the window. That's all.
Okay, I just want to make sure it wasn't on my end. Something I could.
You're good.
Okay, cool.
Moving along.
Can you still hear me okay?
Yeah, totally.
Okay. So lines 3 and 4 give me all of our gems, and also our default is going to be actually require this. This is default. I think this is telling us to set up our default and uh, um, what's the word? Group, like not group. Basically, our default environment is going to be development based on this this environment variable here. Develop environment under a key of Sinatra environment is going to be development if it doesn't already exist, which means that we're going to, and then we're saying, here is the type, here's the exact database, here's the name of the database we're going to build. In this case, it's in our DB folder, and it gets passed an interpolated version of the environment Sinatra environment variable. Okay, this is an environment variable, so it's living at top level. If we ever were going to change it to production, we would give this a different name. But right now, it's just going to be development because that's what we've assigned this string .SQLite. So once we migrate, that's where this is coming from. And then we're loading up everything inside the app folder, and this is our environment. Like that's where this is coming from. So I don't think we really need to look into initializers. We don't have any initializers set up yet, so we're not going to worry about that yet. So Active Record is an ORM, object relational mapping tool, that communicates between the database and Sinatra, and basically it allows us to type and use Ruby and Ruby objects rather than SQL, which is a lot of people prefer. It's a lot nicer. They're easier to work with and change and manipulate than writing a whole bunch of SQL queries. We could do the whole thing in SQL, but then we wouldn't be using Sinatra. We'd be using something else. The whole point of Sinatra and Active Record is that we can write this stuff in Ruby because Ruby is a very friendly language. Does that all make sense? You see.
I mean, the last part. Could you repeat the last part you said?
Okay.
We use Sinatra is because.
So we can type in. So we can build a website using Ruby. We're using Ruby code, right?
Right.
We like Ruby. Ruby's a friendly language. It's fairly straightforward, easy to read, easy to code. It's highly how do I want to say this? It's
adaptable.
It's adaptable, but it's also like when you read it, it looks like you can kind of tell what's going on, right? Like you can see methods make sense. It's not a bunch of really strict syntactical enforcement. It's not, even though it's a high level abstraction. What you're looking at doesn't look that abstract, if that makes sense. It's just a nice language. We like Ruby, and we know Ruby, so yeah, this is our way of being able to spin up a web application on Ruby. Sinatra is a Rack-based web building application. So is Rails, and that just allows us to use Rack. Again, Rack is just a gem that allows us to interact, to build HTTP requests. In other words, the language of the internet, using Ruby as our language. That's really kind of all that's happening. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Cool. And so finally, our views. Tell me about the views here. What's going on here?
Well, the views. If you have multiple controllers and models, you're going to have views in different folders, probably.
Okay. What's this layout thing? What's going on here?
Is that just like the standard HTML for each page?
Yes, exactly. So every time you call ERB within one of your controllers, every time you make an ERB call, every time you render, Sinatra is going to look inside of views. If it finds a layout file, it's going to load this layout file, and then wherever the yield keyword is, that's where whatever view you're calling is going to go. It's going to get loaded, right?
Sure.
Are you okay with that?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Cool. We talked about config environment. We touched on database. Right now there is no database. What's with this migrate folder? What's that for?
That's where we make our tables.
That's where we build our migration files, and our migration files create and change our tables as we build our migrations, right?
Right.
Cool. Lib folder we don't really need to worry about right now. Neither do we really need to worry about public at this point. If we ever do get into style sheets, images, or JavaScripts, we could talk about public, but we could literally get through this whole project, or you could get through this whole project without it. Spec, what's a spec file for?
For the tests.
Yeah, and we're not going to write tests at this point. If you don't mind, I think we could just remove it. We could always bring it back if we wanted to. Okay. How about, we talked about config.ru, which this is kind of unnecessary. If this would throw an error if we need to still run a migration. Certain versions of Active Record and Sinatra don't recognize this method anymore, needs migration. So if you ever see that, just comment out this whole chunk, okay? And eventually we're going to, I'm going to go ahead.
If Active Record migrated.
Yeah. This if you ever saw an error where it says it doesn't recognize the method needs migration, then you can just either cut out or comment this out. I'll leave it for now.
If you saw the error, got it.
Yeah, and I'm going to go ahead and say this could be commented out or removed if there's no method error. Now, as opposed to if you actually get this error, migrations are pending, run rakedb migrate to resolve the issue, that means that this worked, and then you need to run, then you have a pending migration. That's different. Right. So
right. It's sure. Yeah, I've gotten that error before.
Cool. So it's fine if the error, if this error happens, that's great. But if it's a no method error from needs migration, then you can comment that out. So down here, I'm going to go ahead. If I do this, does this mean anything to you?
I know that I just learned about that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember what it does. I know it just like it just came up or just got. I feel like it just got reiterated. Excuse me.
Okay, rack defaults to get or post requests. Okay, so rack method override allows us to send other types actually. Those are really good. Just kidding. Of HTTP requests, including
like patch, delete,
patch and delete. Those are the only ones that you're going to need to worry about right now, including patch and delete. Okay. So that's why I included this line. Without this line of code, we wouldn't be able to do that. Every request would have to be get and post. We could still build our app, but it would be deviating from convention. Now we're going to try and stick to conventions. Let's look at our gem file. Is there anything in here you're curious about? We should really be able to talk about every single one of these. So let's just do that quick. What's Sinatra?
Sinatra is the main framework we're using.
Yep. Active Record.
That is to simplify SQL.
Good. It's our ORM that communicates between our database, that translates our database into Ruby objects and back, and from Ruby objects to SQL. Good. Sinatra Active Record is the glue between them. So that kind of speaks for itself. What's rake?
Is that what allows us to import our tables into the app?
I'm going to say I kind of like that answer. I kind of don't. I think what I'll say is rake is a tool. It's a gem, obviously. These are all gems that allows us to build tasks from the command line. And essentially what that means is it's a bunch of shortcuts for us. So, which we'll talk about a little bit more in depth here in a moment. But it's basically rake.
I did not encapsulate its full abilities.
Yeah, rake is a command line tool. It allows us to build tasks that we run from the command line, basically with shortcuts rather than having to retype out a lot more. That's all. Require all is a gem. Do you know what require all does?
Well, we have require all in the config, right, or in one of the files? Is that what just allows us to use everything?
Require all, well, require all allows us to use the require all method, which is within require all. But what you said is correct. It allows us to use everything, and basically require all allows us to use this line of code to load every single file within a directory, so that otherwise we would have to, however many files there are with an app, for example. So suppose I have like 5 models, 15 views, and like 4 controllers, I would have to write require 20 times. Whereas with require all, I can just point to the directory and say, hey, load every single file within this folder and its subfolders. That's what require all does for us. SQLite 3?
That's the table builder. That's the database. Database tables. That's the whole.
Yep. It's a particular adapter for SQL databases to Ruby. Right? It's one of several ways that we could write SQL using Ruby. How about thin? Do you know what thin is?
I do not know what that is, actually. I saw it and I really had no idea.
Thin is our server. Thin allows you to run a server on your computer. It's called a thin server. We use Shotgun to do it, and Shotgun allows the live refreshes, so that if you change anything within your app folder, you don't have to stop your server and restart it. Those changes will be integrated, within a page refresh. Yeah.
Sure.
Pry.
For finding pry, so we can jump in and troubleshoot.
Good for debugging. Yep. Bcrypt.
That would be for password protection.
It sure is. It hashes and salts our password. It gives us what method do we have access to with bcrypt?
Password digest.
Okay, so password digest is what we're going to need to call one of the columns in the table.
Secure password.
Has secure password is the macro we're going to use on the user's model. Yes.
Clearly, I've caught some of the information.
What's that?
Clearly, I've caught some of the information.
Yeah, no, you're doing great. You're doing great, man. You're doing really well. So,
then let's see. I'm missing so far though.
There's a method that we can use basically. So like once a user has given us information, we could say if user dot. Do you know that method?
No.
It's authenticate. So like it's probably going to look something like this, right? This is the method it's actually an active record method, but it requires that bcrypt be installed or be required. As long as we have bcrypt and we have a password digest in the database, then we can authenticate users with this method. This comes from this is a collaboration between active record and bcrypt. And then do you know what tux is?
Tux allows us to like jump into our code and play around with it, basically.
It gives us a console in which we have access to all of our models and our controllers.
Yeah.
Cool. Then our test group, we have RSpec, which runs our spec tests. Capybara imitates a web server in the background so that we don't have to have anything running when we run our tests. Rack test somewhere in there helps with running tests in a rack-based environment. I can't really talk more about it. Database, I don't know that much. I can't explain much more than that. And database cleaner is a tool for resetting your test environment databases in between tests. Make sense?
Right. I've seen it happening when I'm running tests. Like I can see it kind of blinking.
Okay.
Like the file tree.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Yeah. So, and of course, we always have a source at the top of our gem file. This is where gems live generally. Cool. So good. You actually did a really nice job. You recognized the gems for the most part that you need to know about, which we talked a little bit about rake. And let's just have a quick look at our rake file. And this is kind of like, how do we want to set up our rake? And what we'll do, I think, is, again, we're going to say, hey, for the record, we're in a development environment until told otherwise. We need our environment file, which again is going to load all of our other dependencies with require all and with require. So this gives us everything in our gems and everything in our app folder when rake is up and running. And we need Sinatra active record rake. This gives us a ton of functionality, which we're going to look at right now. So if I say Do you know the command to see all the current rake tasks?
Rake status or rake DB status?
It's rake dash capital T.
Oh.
And I haven't run bundle yet, so I should do that. So I'm going to bundle install. And so what we're going to do is talk about rake in general and rake specific to this line of code right here. So actually what I'll do is we'll start beforehand. So what if I comment this line of code out? I'm going to save it. And I'm going to run that rake dash T again. And I get nothing back. So what I could do you remember how this goes? This is not such a big deal, but I'll just do it real quick. Actually, I'm just going to do something else. Rake, say hi. And I don't know if you remember this, but a task is this is how we build a rake task with the method task. It takes an argument as the name of the task and a block. What do you want to do inside of it? We can literally do anything we want. So inside of here, I'm just going to say puts hello. Okay. So now I don't think that these actually will show up in our rake dash T for some reason. So I'm not sure why. I'm sure there's a way we can make that happen. But if I do rake say hi, then it's going to look for this task. If it finds it, what? Task say hi, do, oh, rake say hi. Sorry, you write it as we write it as a symbol, but when we run it, we just run it as the name of, basically it looks like the name of a method. So this is how we can build a rake task. We could also, if we wanted to, do rake console, and this you might see as well, and we'll do a capital P pry dot start, which is very similar to a binding dot pry, except that we're just forcing a pry console with whatever environment we've described within whatever file we're in. In this case, we're loading up our entire config environment. And so you'll notice that this is going to look very similar to Tux. So whatever, if I had any models, I would have access to these here. Access our models. But we don't yet, so that's okay. Anyway, still, oops. What did I just do? Oh no, oh no. This is terrible. What am I doing? JP, what's that? That's what we had. Okay, so I'll leave that there for now. If I do rake dash T again, we still don't see anything. What's your time limitation, by the way? We're slated. Where's this guy? We're slated to 3:15. I obviously had a cancellation, so I have time. Do you have time right now? Like I should have asked you.
Completely flexible.
Okay, in that case, we'll go. I have a hard stop, probably I guess 4 o'clock or so, thereabouts. Where am I here? Oh no. Here we go. No. Oh yeah, I keep forgetting I'm building inside of the IDE.
Oh yeah,
Okay, so I still don't have any tasks listed, but that's because actually I should know why this isn't showing up, but I don't. But anyway, if I uncomment this line, we'll see that we get a whole bunch of rake tasks from Sinatra Active Record Rake, and they look like this. Okay, so we have these should look familiar.
Right. I've used that before.
Yeah, so the ones that you're going to use probably most often are rake db create migration and rake db migrate. You might use drop. That's pretty much all you're likely to use, or all you really need to use to build out your Sinatra applications within the context of this course. But I just wanted to show you that this is where they're coming from. They're not coming out of the clear blue sky. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Okay, cool. So far, to give you some feedback, like it sounds like you've got a pretty good handle on the MVC structure and what's going on in the Sinatra application. So why don't you?
Talking about it, I was like, oh, okay, I can have a conversation about it.
Yeah. So tell me about the flow in Sinatra. How are we going to actually get started building, and what's it going to look like?
Well, I would think first you would need to know what the models are that you're using.
Yeah, and so what I'm going to do is, how could I do this? I'm going to go to my terminal and I'm going to nope. What if I just look for it? Final, that's it. Why do I have final? It shouldn't be final. Okay, so I'm going to share this document with you. When it comes to building a project, there's kind of like an order of operations that makes sense. And you said it, like basically we need to figure out, oh, come on. We need to figure out what are we going to build, right? So we need to wireframe, build our user stories, and think about like the minimum project. Once we've thought about that, we know our app's going to be, our models, their associations. Then we can start coding, and we'd build out those models and those associations. And finally, we would think about building out the views. And so I feel like, I mean, so far, like I said, you've done really well talking about all this stuff. So where does that? Let's think about just like a quick wireframe. And so I'm going to say touch wireframe dot, I'll just say wireframe dot md. I'll make it a markdown file. And so what do we want to build? We know we need users. We need users. Actually, I don't even need this right now. Okay, so we're going to build a users table. So let's think about our user model. What should our user model have?
Yeah, like names.
Okay, so let's say name. What else? Email maybe?
Yeah, password.
And we'll go ahead and say password. We could go ahead and start with password digest if you want. So I'll say password, and we'll say password digest in the database. I think that's enough. How about associations? And this is where we need to come up with a model of some sort, some other model. So one of our models is going to be user. What's our second model going to be? Anything that you like, whether it's a game or an activity or something you work with, doesn't matter.
What is with games?
Sure, we want to do game. Sure, okay. What's an attribute of a game? Probably a title. Okay, the title of a game. What else?
Yeah.
That's enough for now. And let's talk about associations. So what's our association? Actually, what I'm going to do is build associations on a different line down here.
Users have games.
So this is going to be models.
And we can do it in the context of a video game, I guess, so I can understand it.
Okay. User has many games. Does a game belong to a user, or do we need to bring in? Or can a game belong to multiple users?
A game can belong to multiple users.
In that case, we're going to say
crazy, I guess, but
that's okay. We can.
Only if you made it, if you only had like, if you were only playing with like 4 users, I guess then it's fine.
Well,
Theoretically speaking.
I think it's okay to make, if we're talking about playlister being kind of something you're hung up on, where you have these joined relationships, we might as well build one, I think. So a user has many games and a game has many users. And so here we see, we are seeing a many to many relationship here.
Right.
So how do we solve that here? A user has many game, a game has many users. So what do we need then?
Another model or table, like a user game table or something.
Exactly. This tells us we need a join model.
Join.
We probably need a join table, which means we also need, join table, join model, both. Okay, cool. So we'll say, so that means that we also have, and we'll say user game. our attribute here, what attributes do we need here?
User name and game title.
We actually just need the foreign keys.
Oh, right. User ID and then game ID.
Yep. And since this is Markdown, that's why it's showing funny. But yeah, we just need the foreign keys for this. Cool. So therefore, what this is going to end up being is a user has many user games. Again, we're going to see this funny format because it's Markdown, but a game has many user games, and therefore a user has many games through user games, and vice versa. Oh, that's weird. Guess I can't do that here. And a game then has many users as well. So are we feeling pretty good about this so far?
I understand what you're doing, yeah.
Okay. So now we have our associations, and finally, basically, I think for simplicity's sake, this is just going to be. I'm going to write this as a new section here: user stories. Okay, and I'm basically we're going to finish this sentence. As a user, I can. And then tell me what we can do with this application.
I can see what games I have. Oh, sorry, sign in and sign out.
This is one of the requirements of the project, so we'll just kind of include it here, even if we don't get to it today. I can then now. Sorry, go ahead. What were you going to say?
I guess you could sign out too.
Sign in, sign up,
sign out,
and sign out. Okay. What else?
I can add new games.
Okay.
I can see a list of the games I have.
Cool.
I can delete games.
Cool. So like delete games like from my list or games that I own or games that I create. Depends on how we build this out. Okay. So we're saying create, read. This is destroy or delete. How about edit?
Oh, right. Yeah, I can. Yeah.
Right, and so this is edit. So we see that we have, I'll say update. That way we can see that this is our CRUD functionality, right? Create, yes. Read, update, and edit. So I'm going to actually move this because this is kind of like the basics. We want our CRUD functionality. So this might be like the most the best. Let's think about what you're having the most trouble with, so that we can kind of plan out the next 15 minutes. So are there any aspects of this that you're like, I know this really well, I don't even want to look at that, but something?
It's actually super helpful.
Okay.
I mean, one challenge I have is obviously solving a lab and understanding the language, and okay, I have to make sure that, like, I just worked on something where I had to turn the string into split it, and then I got to join it again with dashes, like so. This is a lot of functionality, but I realize that is obviously almost separate from this, because that's going back to things I've already learned, but just having to now do them again. I actually think this is super helpful, because this is reiterating to me like what this whole thing is, which I think is actually helpful. So literally everything we're doing right now is, I think, right on track with one of the big things that I need to be doing and seeing, actually.
Okay, well that's good. Then in that case, we'll kind of plug forward. And the next question is, do you want to talk about creating sessions first, or do you want to jump in and start creating an application that doesn't rely on users to be signed in order to work, which we would have to then go back and edit
Right. This needs users to be able to be signed in, because each user is unique.
Okay, so then that's kind of where I would start. And so to plan things out here, so going forward, I'll say first steps.
Yeah, because I'll just interrupt real quick. Like when I look at the issues I'm having, I can see how they're more like they're so specific versus general. You know what I mean? Like it's a specific problem. So I think this is actually a good use of the time because this is looking at the whole picture and helping me to have a greater, I think, grasp of what I'm doing, and also kind of showing me that, you know, I clearly I'm learning. You know, I'm clearly retaining a lot of this material. It seems, you know.
Yeah, no, you're able to answer a lot of these questions really well. I've seen people a lot more confused than you seem to be. Anyway, so we're gonna first create our models. So this is the Ruby side of things, and then from there we're gonna add our associations. And I'm gonna go ahead and say this is where we should also add validations. Okay, we'll talk about validations in a second.
Okay, yeah, I was gonna say I wasn't sure what you meant by that.
And so we kind of have two options kind of going forward. We're getting a little thin on time. So either I can move kind of quickly and talk about it, and you can chime in as I'll ask you questions along the way, or we can kind of move slowly and focus on one thing.
No, I'm cool with you moving quickly, and I'll just chime in.
Okay. So
The benefit of recording is, so I'm okay with that.
okay. So first we'll create users, and then our games models, and then of course the other thing is I'll say 3A, create our join model as well. So these are the models. Then we'll create our associations and add our validations. Finally, we will add add foreign keys to our migrations, and then migrate and test our migrations, or test our associations, models, and validations in Tux. Okay, so all this is going to happen. By the way, what should I have done by now? I've written enough with this wireframe, and I've deleted some stuff. What should I have done that I haven't done yet along the way?
Oh, you should have saved it.
Yeah, I definitely should have. And you can see that I have a couple of deletions, modifications, and some new files. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say git add dot. I'm also going to add the tag dash dash all. That's going to allow these deletions to go through because I want to get rid of them as well. So this is going to add everything. Git commit, and I'm just going to. This is going to be a terrible message because it's way too much stuff. But add wireframe planning and tweak the. What did we tweak? Actually, we didn't do much. I really didn't do much actually. Tweak config.ru, I'll say. Delete spec. Uh-oh. Oh no. That's rough. Huh? Uh-oh. Let's see what we got here. Oh, whoa, you gotta be kidding me. So this highlights why we should have been committing all along.
Yeah, well, benefit that we recorded it.
It is a benefit that we recorded it. We completely lost our, let me just double check and see if it's in the backup here. Oh, that's a pain in the butt. Right when I was being responsible and actually getting ready to push this stuff up.
I'm just glad we recorded it.
Yeah. So really, what we lost was our wireframing. But you know, I know what was in there, so I'm just going to kind of push forward regardless of where this thing lands. Where's Chrome? What did we call it? Sinatra practice? Oh wait, that's not. I actually want Learn Code Sandbox. I know what's in Sinatra practice.
Updated a minute ago. Sounds promising.
Yeah, that's the sandbox, and so I might which does automatically update and save things as we go. So there's a good chance that our file is actually in our sandbox. I'm going to look on the work in progress branch. Don't mess with your sandbox, by the way, like I'm doing.
I never use it.
I'm actually not going to mess with it. The only thing that I would do would be to, oh no, it didn't get updated, did it? Because we had a wireframe.md. Yep. Oh well. Okay. So that's a bummer, but it's not such a big deal. So what I'm going to do now, by the way, is the way that I'm going to do this. This is different. This might be a little different from what you do with when you're building on the IDE. That's the desktop version. I'm actually going to clone the repository because right now, so the way that Sandbox works, it automatically backs everything up and puts it in that Sandbox thing. So if I say git remote -v, it's going to tell me that I'm in my sandbox. Even if I go into that Sinatra project, if I say git remote -v, it's still pointing at my sandbox. So what I'm going to do is grab the repository that I want, which is here, maybe. This guy. I'm going to clone it back down. So the reason I have to clone it every time is that the sandbox is a temporary environment. And so I'm actually going to run a git clone on this guy. And so now I'm back where I was, minus the wireframing, which we're just going to not worry about right now. And let me even see, so which one are we in? Sinatra practice, this one. So not this one, but this guy. So let me see, I made a change to config.ru, didn't I? Yep, and that didn't persist. So I'm going to use rack method override. Now what I'm going to do is, let's see, if I do git remote -v, like what's my remote? There it is, it's the right one. So I'm going to say git status. We can see that we just made this change, and I'm actually going to go ahead and commit this. Git commit add rack method override to config.ru. Okay, and so I'm gonna actually start pushing very regularly here. So I'm gonna leave the gem file alone and the rake file alone. I deleted some of the stuff in the spec folder, but we're just gonna leave it there for now because it's not hurting anything. So I'm actually gonna use Cornel. And in these steps, I'm going to take a little bit quickly here to get us going again. Besides configuring where my views live and where my public folder is, I'm also going to enable sessions. Okay, and set. Let's see. Let's see if I get this one right. Session secret.
That's for the password stuff, right? Is that cookies?
This is for the cookies. This is to set the session. I don't remember if this could be wrong. This could blow up in our face. We'll see. I think it's set session secret and then whatever it is. So if this isn't right, then we'll look up the syntax elsewhere. But basically, this creates a hashed version of a session ID that is unique, so that someone can't impersonate you. Is basically what's happening. So now I'm going to go ahead and start creating because if you remember what we were writing about, I'm going to create my models, and I'm going to use a rake task first, and I'm going to do it from scratch. Rake db create migration, and what it takes is it takes a name parameter, and the convention is to just name this class exactly what you're doing. So create users table. Okay, and I got a bundle again because we disconnected. And then I'm going to run that same command again. And so now that what that did was it created this folder, this file inside of my migrate folder that's time stamped. And the reason we do this is we could do this by hand, but this creates migrations in order.
Sure.
I want create table, users do t, and if you don't remember the syntax, you can always look it up.
T.string
Yep, we want t exactly. What are our strings here?
equals, or sorry, not equals, colon name. So is that considered semicolon? Semicolon.
That's a colon, not a semicolon.
Oh, colons. Yeah, get them mixed up. So, okay, colon name. Oh, I know what it looks like. T-string password digest. T-string game.
I think we did email. We don't, and so this is the has many side of the relationship. Actually, probably should do this second. What I should have done was this first. Touch app. Whoops. Rub. I don't know what that is. Touch app models user.rb. And so that'll create a model file inside of here called user. Do you remember how the structure of this file goes?
I know it's like class, user, and then it's active record.
Good.
Colon base.
Good. So the class user is inheriting from the active record base class. The active record is the name of the gem, therefore it's going to be the name of the main module holding all the files. Base is the name of the class within that we're inheriting from. Cool. So we're going to save that. I am going to go ahead and well, I guess we can finish these. So what do we know we want in terms of our associations here?
Has many. No.
Yep.
Has many games.
Well, we decided we were going to use a user of a join model, right?
Yeah, has many user games.
And then so this is what is going to give us our has many games through user games. There we go. So what I'm going to do is now, and I'm going to go ahead. What do we want to validate here? First of all, we know we're going to use has secure password. What else do we want to validate?
Or you want to validate that they have a name?
I think so. I think a user definitely needs a name. Do we need to? Should they have an email too, or not? Is that optional? You can say that's optional if you want.
Okay.
Whatever you want. So but this looks plenty good to get started.
Well, then you don't need anything to even identify it.
That's right. So now we're saying this. We need a password, and we're going to use. Not only do we need a password, but we're going to use has secure password. I don't have to add password here because in this part, like I don't need to do this. Because has secure password includes the presence validation already on it.
If I needed to validate an email, would it all be on one line?
I could do name, email, presence true, like that.
We leave that in, that just helps me to.
Sure. Yep. Sure thing. So now that I've added these things, I don't want to lose these. So I'm going to say git add dot. See, this is why I'm doing this. Okay, git commit add user model and migration. Okay, so push those up. Now, I could actually create this table. How would I actually create this table? Because right now it doesn't exist.
Do we have the table ready under like is the stuff we need there?
Yeah, we built our migration.
Rake DB migrate.
There we go. Rake DB migrate.
Couldn't remember if it was completed.
Cool. So now we have a database. Look at that. That file does not contain text. It's not editable. That's fine. And we have a schema. And a schema is a snapshot of our database at any given time. Right now, we simply have a users table with three different string attributes. So I could, now that I have a table, I could drop into tux. How about bundle exec tux maybe? There we go. And I can see that I have a user. Hopefully, there it is. User.new. This is an empty user with nothing. I'm going to say that u equals that thing. Is that valid? No, I probably have some errors. Dot full messages. This gives me the errors dot full messages. So this tells me what my validations are that have failed right now. doesn't have a password, and a name, and an email, and I've required all those things. So this is looking good so far. So now what I'm going to do is show you a little bit of a shortcut. Shortcuts are fun. To creating, how come I can't close this file? Oh well. So first I'm going to, oops, I'm just going to do this like religiously here. Migrate users table. Okay. Now I'm going to show you a shortcut using Cornel. So Cornel allows us to scaffold out stuff to some extent. So I can say Cornel model game, and then I can pass in some attributes. You said title.
Yeah.
Actually, that's all we did was title, right? And this will default to string. If I want to say something other than string, I can say something like integer or whatever. But we want this to be a string. And so check this out. So what this is going to do. Oh, okay. So I have to gem install.
We didn't have the gem with Cornel, maybe.
Yeah, that's because of that reconnect.
Can I have one thing? If we wanted another attribute, what would it look like? Like if we just said title and let's say console, how would that look as you add it?
Say that again. What's that?
You added title, so you're adding title, but let's say you added console, like what console? PlayStation, Xbox.
Oh, sure, we can do that.
I want to see what that would look like.
Sure. Should console be? Console sounds like something to me that would actually probably be a relationship because a game could have many consoles, couldn't it? And a console would have many games. Again, it almost sounds like a join model, but we could do it. We could just say it's a string for now. That's fine. So gem install Cornel. I already did that. So now I can actually use Cornel to create this stuff. And so notice what it did for us was it created a migration file the same way that RakeDB migrate would, except that it went ahead and added title. So if I wanted to, you said you wanted to do console as well. So I'll just say console, or do you want to say console or consoles? It's up to you.
We can just do console.
Okay, that's cool. We could just talk about one game kind of. And it also gave us our game model, which inheriting from Active Record Base already. So that's kind of nice. It just creates these two files for us.
In that Cornel model game title, we have just written Cornel model game space title space console, or
correct. That's exactly correct. If you wanted it to be a string, yeah. Yep. Oh, sorry.
Okay, got it.
Cool. So now we have two migration files. We have our game model. I'm going to go ahead and add Cornel in here where you can see how we would use it with a different data type. Model. This is going to be user game. Notice the structure here is snake casing. User game needs a user ID as an integer and a game ID as an integer. And again, it's going to create a migration file for us.
You didn't say integer, those would have been strings.
Correct. Now, if you do that, it's not a big deal. You just go in here and change this from integer to string before you migrate. You'll be fine. So notice now we have user game, and user. So those are we built user by hand. Notice it wasn't that hard, but it's nice to use the shortcuts once we have them. Now I'm going to run RakeDB migrate again, and then git add dot, git commit, add user and user game models and migrate. Okay, and so from here, this is where we would start to talk about building out views and actually build out. We would add some controllers and start thinking about routes. I think after actually the next step really should be to add our associations. User belongs to game. Do we have anything else here in game? Game has many. So this is going to be easy because we can literally copy paste from user and just change one word, which is just that.
It's a many relationship.
Exactly. So this is just going to be has many users. Okay. So now the next step would be to actually drop into tux. Actually, the truth is the next step would be to add to commit again. And you really should commit this often when you're coding. This is
Yeah, I
not
did
like an
when I was doing my
exaggeration.
CLI project. I was committing nonstop.
Oops, to game. That's good. Okay, so now even if this thing crashed, we would still have all of our data. Okay, now the next thing would be to make sure that we can actually create some data. And I would say we should create a seed file, which would give us some data. But what I could do is just say Howard equals user.new, Howard.name equals, oh my gosh, Howard.email equals Howard@howard.com, Howard password equals password, Howard.valid, Howard.save. Cool. So now I've got user.first, there I am. Now I can create some games too. So I could say new, let's see, I don't know, about Mario Kart equals, I'm going to say, let's see, what I'm going to do is say that, I have Howard, right? Yeah, okay, so so Mario, I'm just testing to make sure that everything worked okay, equals Howard.game. So this is going to be automatically associated with me, .build. So I can check this thing.
What does that build do?
.build is like .new, but it gives us our associations.
Okay.
So actually, do we not have? Oh, a user has many games. Yeah, that's right. Let's see what happens here. So this is actually not a has many belongs to relationship. This is a many to many relationship. I think this would still work. Let's see what happens here. Mario Kart dot title equals Mario Kart. Mario Kart dot console equals, I'll just say N64. And let's see if this thing is valid. It is. So what we'll see is actually user game. Are there any of these things? Okay, no. So this is something actually, this didn't work the way I wanted it to. So there's a good lesson here. If I say Howard.games, we're going to lose this thing. But if I say game.first.users, okay, so this actually was a bad. I showed you a bad thing. We shouldn't have used build for that relationship. I should have used I should have just created the new game and then shoveled it into my collection.
Just game.new equals. Just...
Yeah. So what I'm going to do though is say game.first.update and pass in user IDs and just say it's number 1, and that should associate it to me. So now I should have user game.any. Does this exist yet? Good. And now if I say game.first.users, what I was showing you was something that would be good for a has many belongs to, but because I had the many to many, I really want to create them separately and then associate them. So
you could have just done game.new or game.create, right?
Yeah, I could have. Yep, I could say game.create title. Is it title?
Title, yeah.
Title Ocarina of Time. And this is actually this should work because I think that's the only thing we required. And I'll say C equals that thing, C dot console equals N64, one of my favorite N64 games ever. And what I can do is say Howard.games and shovel in Zelda. right? So
Oh, okay.
now I've created that new association, even though I never said user game.new specifically. I could
Right.
say count. Now I should have 2, and I could say that
Okay.
Howard.
I mean that process makes sense.
Okay. So I'm going to end this screen share, and I'll share this repository with you if you kind of want to play with it and keep working on it. We obviously haven't even gotten to controllers or views yet, but this is the process that I would recommend when it comes to building something out. Those would be the next steps.
This is
So
helpful.
so if you want to think about what those would look like, I would start with signing in, logging in and logging out, creating those and creating your sessions, and from there you could go to.
I appreciate all the time. This was immensely helpful.
Cool. Um, Talks console. Cool. So what I'm going to do is go back here. I should see that these updated a few seconds ago, and hopefully, maybe. That's interesting. Oh, 16 seconds. Good. Okay. So I'm going to do. What time is it? Okay, good. This should have just enough time. I'm going to go to collaborators. And what's your GitHub name?
Adam, hold on. Here, I'll go ahead and do it right
Actually, what I think.
now. Take off.
What I think you could do is just fork it. That'd probably be better anyway.
Okay.
So you can fork. So go to. I'll just go back here. You can see this. This is public, so you can see it and fork it.
How do I?
Just like you do with a Learn lesson. So I'm going to open this up. What's your Slack name?
Adam dash. Hold on. Adam is just Adam.
Adam. It is just Adam.
Oh, like display name is Adam, but my Slack name I think is Adam space call.
Cool. So now you can just fork that, and then if you want to play with that, you can. Yeah. If you have any questions or anything down the road, hit me up. I'm going to stop the screen